What's up guys? Welcome to AnimeKouhai, an extension of Anime Senpai PH channel. All pieces of information are derived from the light novel. In today's video, we will continue Chapter 1, Volume 8 of the light novel, entitled Reconciliation and Agreement. This video is the second part of Chapter 1 in our Tensura spoiler video series. If you haven't watched the previous episodes, feel free to check out the links in the description below. Now, let's get to the video. Rimuru had been watching them, but the method Veldora chose for his apology only served to rile up Luminous. She was trying to put her sword away, and then Veldora went off like he was laughing hysterically and told Luminous that he had no bad intentions back then. Veldora asked Luminous to call it a youthful mistake and forgive him with her most generous of hearts. That was easily enough to set her off. Luminous asked Rimuru to bring him to her, calling Veldora that lizard. She ordered Rimuru in a voice that would make her hair stand on end, as Luminous glared behind Rimuru at Veldora in all his haughtiness. Frankly, Rimuru didn't want to get on Luminous's bad side over something like this. He knew exactly how Luminous felt. That was no apology at all. Veldora ought to be taught a lesson over this, Rimuru thought. So Rimuru said alright, and without hesitation, he grabbed Veldora by the neck and presented him to Luminous. Veldora was surprised and complained that Rimuru had betrayed him. At a time like this, it's important that you get your message across. Rimuru needed to make sure everything was crystal clear to everyone about this if he didn't want Luminous to have any lingering resentments. Luminous gave Rimuru a surprised look, then let out a smile, cold enough to freeze blood. Luminous then said that she was glad to see that Rimuru possessed great senses of perception, unlike that lizard over there. Rimuru replied that it's nothing that great, but he knew that Veldora had been a real thorn in her side this time. Rimuru told Luminous that if she agreed to forgive Veldora afterward, she could feel free to rake him over the coals as much as she liked. Luminous grinned and nodded. She said that she would give that some thought. That seemed to smooth things over with Luminous well enough. Veldora was shouting things and asking them if his opinion didn't matter at all, as Luminous dragged him away. But neither she nor Rimuru was paying attention. Luminous told Veldora that it was time for her to let off all the steam she had been building up. "Embracing drain," said Luminous. Veldora started screaming out in pain. It looked like Luminous was giving Veldora a hug, but there was certainly no sweet sentiment behind it. It was really more of a bear hug, despite the height difference. You'd think that wouldn't be enough to hurt Veldora much. Understood. She is absorbing the magical energy from the target, while injecting it with signals of intense pain and discomfort. These signals likely install themselves into the soul of the individual until cut off, regardless of cancel pain possession, explained Raphael. Rimuru understood from Raphael that this attack could cause pain and discomfort to a spiritual life form like Veldora. Rimuru supposed that in a way, this seemed a lot more effective than just destroying him. With the near-infinite stores of energy Veldora had, no amount of energy draining on Luminous's part would kill him, but she could wear him out. Rimuru imagined that adding pain and discomfort to the mix would make for a punishment Veldora wouldn't soon forget. Luminous kept going with that attack for a decent amount of time. Veldora started crying out, tear-filled eyes, longingly staring at Rimuru, but Rimuru watched silently and offered no mercy. This was for Veldora's sake, or really, if sacrificing him was all it took to make Luminous feel better, Rimuru would say he got a bargain. One could call it a political transaction, but Rimuru couldn't help it. An expressionless Louie observed that Luminous seemed to be enjoying herself. He said that at least it would let her work through all her negative emotions as of late. and he couldn't be happier. Hinata agreed, nodding, and said that given they didn't know who killed Roy, they didn't want any needless hostility right now. By the way, just to be sure, that guy over there, is he? Hinata looked at Veldora, a bit unsure of herself. Rimuru remembered that they hadn't made the introductions yet. Rimuru replied that was Veldora, and it's kind of hard to tell when he's not in dragon form and all, but it's definitely him. Rimuru continued that he thought Veldora was kind of busy right now, but he would introduce her to each other later. Veldora heard this, so he tried to escape Luminous and cried to Rimuru that he should introduce them now. But Luminous still hadn't had enough and was more annoyed, so she sort of intensified the punishment. And Veldora once again screamed out in pain. Poor guy, said Rimuru to himself. It was his fault for trying to escape Luminous. Rimuru could tell she increased the voltage or whatever just now. Loose lips sink ships, and so on. Hinata couldn't believe that this was the storm dragon who Lady Luminous feared so much. Hinata looked disappointed, but nobody could blame her, because right now, Veldora was little more than comic relief, no sort of draconic majesty whatsoever. It was hard to believe that this was a catastrophe-level monster straight out of a nightmare. The other paladins must have thought the same thing because they couldn't have looked more confused. They couldn't believe that's the storm dragon they were told such terrifying tales about. One paladin even said that he honestly felt a little sorry for him. Rimuru thought that the form he had taken was tricking a few of the paladins, to be honest. Plus, Rimuru would base his own replication on a younger Shizu. So similarly, if Veldora kept his mouth shut, he looked like a pretty handsome young man. If a guy like him was shouting for help, with that desperate plea in his eyes, it would move the hearts of untold numbers of women. But don't be fooled. Indulge him just a little, and he'll walk all over you. Rimuru needed to teach Veldora some firm discipline right away, or else they would pay dearly for it later. Report: the aura of Veldora the Storm Dragon, previously in danger of spontaneously combusting, has fallen back within the threshold of stability, said Raphael. Rimuru was shocked to hear that. He wondered if Raphael had predicted that Luminous would do that too. That was a bit much for even him to swallow. It would be impossible to read that far ahead. No need to give him that much credit. The fight with Hinata had followed Raphael's plan so closely though. Rimuru couldn't help but feel that way. Rimuru shook his head, banishing the thought. Rimuru told the paladins that he would say, "It's time to head out," and he knew that they'd had a few misunderstandings. But once things calmed down, he would like to discuss their future plans. With that, Rimuru guided the paladins back to town. Rigurd was waiting for them at the gate, panting. Rimuru had sent Soei on ahead to send the news, and he'd just now run out to greet them. Soei didn't need to do that. Rimuru was sure he gave him ample warning, but the guy just liked to run, Rimuru guessed. Soei said with a friendly smile that on behalf of the city of Tempest, he welcomed each and every one of them. Nice smile there. Soei must have learned it as part of his diplomatic efforts, and it put a professional service worker to shame. Rimuru appreciated it, especially given how they had their swords at the ready against these paladins not long ago. Rigurd said they would prepare meals for all of them, so he asked them to let them know if there was anything they would prefer not to have. Rimuru had to hand it to Rigurd's zeal for study, making sure to check if anyone had any allergies or religious reasons to avoid certain foods. Rigurd must have been roping in adventurers and merchants while Rimuru wasn't paying attention, learning about human culture and thought. Would anyone believe that this guy used to be a helpless goblin? Hinata replied that there was no need to go out of their way for them. Hinata looked a bit awkward about this, preparing to turn the offer down, but they needed to talk about their future relations. It was already evening by now, so that talk would likely come the next day. And since they were here anyway, Rimuru couldn't ignore a chance to advertise their city a little. Rimuru told them to stop worrying about it. They could talk in more detail tomorrow. So for today, he asked them to let them treat themselves to a peacemaking party. Veldora, the excitement shining in his eyes, said that a party was a fine idea, and with that would come a fine drink. Veldora, looking none the worse for wear after Luminous's punishment, was naturally the first to react. He was in fine shape, after all. Not that Rimuru had been concerned. Rimuru was surprised when someone said that if this was a feast, she imagined that she was invited as well. Luminous, out of nowhere, was standing right next to Rimuru, and she was invited, of course, but Rimuru wondered if things were really square with her and Veldora. Rimuru responded, well sure, and asked her what he called her, calling her Lord Luminous. Luminous told Rimuru to stop being weird. She said Luminous was fine. Rimuru supposed it was, because they were fellow Octagram members. He said alright, and Luminous was safe, calling him Rimuru too. Rimuru asked her what about Veldora. Luminous said that she wouldn't forgive him. That much was certain. She had come here today to atone for what her servants had done. In deference to Rimuru, she would give the lizard his full punishment another day. That's it for this video, guys. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and click the bell notification icon so you will never miss the upcoming continuation of Tensura's spoiler video series. Thank you for always watching my videos and supporting my channel. Shout out to the top 10 commenters on my previous video. Shout out to John Lester, Luke Develox, Abdul Fatawu, Jess Raj Jen, Diablo, Amaral Tempest, Yusef BTR, Joji Ray, Clash with Adarsh, Chuckles Must Die, Brandon Combs, Riri Tokisaki, Philson, Let's Do It Simply, Eric Fimate, and last but not the least, shout out to Kawanshuan. I'll see you guys in the next video.